Okay, so now let us continue, of course, with the suttas where we left off yesterday. So yesterday we had a look at the Subha Sutta, and many of these things we have looked at so far are in a way like an overview of the idea of freedom and liberation, however you want to call it. And now we're going to look at some of the details, how the idea of freedom is expressed at various stages on the path. Starting with the idea of generosity, how that is a sense of freedom, and then going gradually all the way to the end of the path to see how this is expressed in the suttas. And then we come back to the more the practical applications again after that. So as we saw before, we saw the idea of the gradual expression of the Dhamma, starting with generosity. So generosity is like the first, at least in some places in the suttas, is at the start of the path. And so you want to connect this idea to the idea of freedom. How is generosity connected to freedom? And this can be found in many places in the suttas, and in particular it is found as one of the recollections, the 6 recollections, the anusatis, as they are known. And one of those recollections is the recollection of generosity, chaganusati. Chaga is generosity or giving up, and anusati is recollection. And one of the expressions of this is found in the sutta called the Mahanama Sutta, in the numerical discourses, the 6th chapter, the 10th sutta. And this Mahanama is the same Mahanama I mentioned yesterday, the brother of Anuruddha, where Anuruddha eventually went forth, and Mahanama stayed in the household life and practiced as a householder, became a very kind of famous householder who became a stream winner, stream enterer, it seems, etc., etc. So let us have a look at this standard expression of generosity as we find it in the suttas. So, at one time the Buddha was staying in the land of the Sakyans, near Kapilavatthu in the banyan tree monastery, the Nigrodharama. Then Mahanama the Sakyan went up to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him. So here the Buddha has gone back. He doesn't seem to have gone back all that often to his relatives, the Sakyan clan, but occasionally he would go there, and this is one of these occasions. And Kapilavatthu or Kapilavastu is, of course, like the main city of the main town of the Sakyans. It's a fairly humble place. It is not that large, at least in those days. So then there was a monastery there called the Nigrodharama, the banyan tree monastery. So then he says, "Sir, when a noble disciple has reached the fruit and understood the instruction, what kind of meditation do they frequently practice?" And so here we have this idea of a noble disciple. So this seems to indicate that Mahanama was already an Aryan at this point. He already had a deep insight into the teachings. And this is also suggested by the one who has understood the instruction, and reached the fruit. Understood the instruction here means like fully understood, penetrated this fully, and has reached the fruit. The fruit means that you have tasted kind of the Dhamma. You know what the Dhamma is all about. And so this would seem then to be an instruction to noble people. So what about ordinary people? Do people who are not noble, can they also follow these instructions? And the answer is yes, they can follow these instructions as well. It's just that for the noble people, the Aryas, it is more or less automatic. Because you understand the Dhamma, you know what the Buddha is, you know what the Dhamma is, and because you know that and you understand it directly, it means that it's very easy for you to get inspired by that, because you understand why this leads to happiness, why this has to do with the meaning of life, why there is nothing more valuable in the world, etc. And so because you know that directly, it means it's relatively easy for you to use these kind of reflections. For non-Aryas, it is not quite as straightforward. You have to spend more time on making something out of this, contemplating the qualities of the Buddha, contemplating the qualities of the Dhamma, etc. And for non-Aryans, it is sometimes easier to focus on the Chaganusati or Silanusati, the recollection of your generosity or your morality, because that is more tangible than maybe the Buddha or the Dhamma, which actually requires more insight. And so in the sutta, you see 6 different recollections. And as always, there is a hierarchy in those things. The most powerful recollection is the recollection of the Buddha, because it gives a direct insight or direct access to the highest qualities of the Dhamma. But you have to understand what the Buddha is, otherwise you can't do that. And then as you go down to the Chaganusati, you're coming towards the bottom of this hierarchy. It is not as powerful, but it is more easily accessible for everyone, because we all know, to some extent, what it means to be generous, what it feels like. It can be a very powerful emotional qualities coming with this when you are generous in the right way. And so it is applicable to everyone, even though here is talking about the someone who has reached fruit. Still, it is applicable to everyone. And then the Buddha replies. He says, Mahanama, when a noble disciple has reached fruit and understood the instructions, they frequently practice this kind of meditation, or they frequently live in this kind of way. And then you have the various recollections I just mentioned, and then the 5th one is the recollection of generosity. So this is what we have here. So furthermore, a noble disciple recollects their own generosity. I am so fortunate, so very fortunate. Among people full of the stain of stinginess, I live at home, rid of stinginess, freely generous, open-handed, loving to let go, committed to charity, loving to give and to share. So this is the basic idea of recollecting generosity. This and so this is gives us a rough idea of how to do this recollection. And it starts off in a really kind of, to me, very powerful way. It's almost like the very first sentence there is the most powerful one. I am so fortunate, so very fortunate. And what you are fortunate about is that with so many people around who are stingy, you don't have that stinginess. You are actually generous. And this is a very powerful kind of insight right there. Because very often, if you are generous and other people around you are stingy, or if you are moral and other people are maybe immoral, and very often it's easy to kind of think, I have to do all the hard work, I have to kind of do this, I have to that, other people are just slacking off, not doing their share or whatever. This is kind of a standard way of thinking about things in the world. We want other people to also share the burdens of life. But actually, it is not a very useful way of thinking about things, because very often it just leads to negativity. It leads to all kind of negative mind states, and very often you can't change other people anyway. They just are the way they are. And so much more powerful than that is to look at other people, and when you see how they might not live up to their Buddhist ideals or whatever, it's almost like you have compassion for them. You have compassion because you realize they don't really understand. They don't understand the opportunities to give. They don't understand the opportunities to be of service. They don't understand how the Dhamma actually works. And so they are the ones who are missing out. If they are slacking off, they are not doing what they are supposed to be doing. They are not generous when probably they maybe should be. They are the ones who have the problem, not you. And when you realize that, you start to feel, wow, how fortunate I am. I actually have an insight into this. I have an understanding about the idea of generosity. I understand the joy, the tranquility, the meaning, the all these positive qualities that arise out of this. I am the fortunate one because I see this connection, and these poor people, they don't get it. Yeah, and then you have a sense of compassion for them, and then you kind of maybe gently urge them to go in the right direction, or you live by example or whatever. And maybe down the track they also will have their eyes open and they will see what is going on. And so this changes your entire outlook. Instead of being negative when other people don't kind of do what they're supposed to be doing, instead you have a compassion for them. It doesn't mean that we should always allow people to just do whatever they want. Sometimes they need to be prodded a little bit. Sometimes they need to kind of, please help out. This is just too much for me or whatever. And that's also okay. But it gives you a general idea for the right kind of attitude to have in this sort of situation. And it eliminates a lot of that negativity that you might otherwise have. So this is kind of the ideal. Yeah, it's a high ideal to reach. And so it's something that we're kind of aspiring for. And if you're not there yet, don't despair. You just understand what is going on, and then gradually your mind will turn in that direction. So consider yourself fortunate if you have an understanding of generosity, because actually it is not common in the world to have this kind of attitude. So you live with a mind rid of stinginess, and you have these. Then you have these various ways that this is expressed. Yeah, freely generous, mutta chaga, and the mutta here is the word free. Free, freely generous. There's a sense of freedom in the idea of generosity here. Freely generous. There's no holding on. There's no kind of attaching to things anymore. You are freely giving of the things that are yours. You're sharing with everyone in the whole world, not really holding back at all. So what does that mean, that you are freely generous? What is the freedom? Well, the freedom is the freedom of not being clingy as to your own possessions and what you own in this world. And if you understand what is going on here, you will know what that freedom feels like. It is the opposite of being attached to things. It's the opposite of keep your hands off my stuff, that kind of thing, where you are kind of, the mind is kind of small, the mind is clingy, the mind is fragile, the mind is confined in a small space. These are mine things. And when you have that kind of attitude, the world outside seems scary, because the world outside seems like they might rip you off, they might take your things, and you kind of lock yourself off in this little box, me and mine, and you put a big fence around everything, and you have kind of cameras and watchtowers and what have you. Like these gated communities that you find around the world. And I think these gated communities are terrible ideas. Sometimes they may be required because maybe there's a lot of violence in the neighborhood, but very often there may not be that much violence. It's just that people are afraid. So they want to be careful. But what if someone is going to rob my house? Even if the chance is very small, you want to have this kind of, and then you divide people. You're no longer living as part of the larger society. Much better to say, well, if there's a burglar, they want to steal something, okay, please come in and take what you like, That is much better. And then you don't have, this kind of concern. You don't have to fence yourself off from the world. If you are so desperate, then, here, take this, and, have a good life or whatever. I think that is better, because then you don't kind of have this sense of confinement in your life, where your mind is small and narrow and unfree, basically. And this is this idea that you sometimes hear about being, whether you truly own your possessions or whether your possessions own you. Now, what is the difference between those two things? And if you truly own something, it means you have the power to give it away. That's what real ownership means. Okay, this is mine, I want to give it away. But if the possession owns you, it means that, yes, in a sense it is yours, but you don't have the power to give it away because you're clinging to it, you're holding on to it. In that case, the possession owns you because you no longer have the freedom to get rid of it or to give it away or to support someone else with it. And so true ownership means, okay, this is mine, okay, I can give it away at any time. Yeah, that is the right kind of ownership from the Dhamma point of view. You're not really clinging on to things so much. And that is a far more open-minded, much more conducive way. Yeah, it's a mind that is far more pleasant to live with rather than the mind which is very confined and very narrow and very limited in the way it deals with the world. So there is freedom in giving. Yeah, there's a liberation of the mind in the idea of generosity. And as I mentioned on the first day, the idea here is that any kind of ownership we have, the reason why we own something is because it is an extension of our sense of self. Ownership is an extension of the sense of self. Ownership begins with the ownership of the five khandhas. Yeah, you feel that you own your awareness. You feel that you own your feelings. You own the perceptions of the world. This is what makes you. Yeah, that is kind of the base ownership. Either it is identity, this is who you are, or these are appendages to that identity, and you own these things. And then that sense of identity or ownership with regard to the five khandhas, that then also goes into the world at large. Yeah, you own things in the world, like your glasses, for example. Yeah, very handy to have glasses. So I own these glasses. These are my glasses, and you can't have them. If you want to borrow them, you can borrow them. So please let me know. But so you own things, and that is the sense of self kind of going into the world. So when you give something away, what you are really doing, you are reducing your sense of self. And if you feel what it feels like to give, it is precisely that feeling you have when you give, when you let go of something that is yours. That is a non-self kind of feeling. Yeah, you are no longer holding on. You're no longer clinging. You're no longer grasping onto things in the world. And so it is the similar movement of the mind as you find in the awakening experiences. Yeah, when you awaken, you give up the sense of self completely. Here you are giving it up in a very small degree, but it's the same kind of rough idea. And so it gives you, it's a beautiful way of thinking about the idea of awakening, letting go of the sense of self to a certain extent. And this says something about the power of generosity and why it is so liberating, because it is the same direction that you're heading in when you're heading towards awakening itself. Isn't that kind of a nice thought? Yeah, it's kind of, we think about awakening and the enlightenment as very profound things, but actually small aspects of that can be found in the very ordinary things of life. It's the same kind of direction that we are going, and this is the liberating direction, moving away from the sense of self, which is actually a very oppressive feeling that kind of shuts us off from the world outside because of this boundaries that we create between ourselves and the world around us. And so this is how this freedom is related to the idea of generosity. Yeah? And so you are open-handed. You are loving to let go. Loving to let go. Can't remember the Pali here, anyway, doesn't matter. Committed to charity, loving to give and to share. Yeah, so you are always kind of on the outlook of possibilities to be able to share and to give and to be generous, basically. And so that is the foundation for this kind of reflection. And the more generous you are as a person, the easier it is to reflect in this way. And then when you sit down to do your meditation or whatever, it has very positive results. Yeah, what happens then is the following. And this is essentially what we saw yesterday when we were looking at the Subha Sutta. We were seeing how generosity leads to joy, etc. This is exactly what comes next here. So when the noble disciple recollects their own generosity, their mind is not full of greed or desire, ill will, and confusion, or greed, hate, and delusion. At that time, the mind is unswerving based on generosity. Unswerving is like straight. Yeah, it is not kind of going all over the place. It is straight. Straight here is the idea that you don't have any defilements in the mind. That's the idea of straight. Defilements, they make the mind crooked. And if you have a straight mind, it is one that is not crooked. A noble disciple whose mind is unswerving finds inspiration in the meaning and the teaching, and finds joy connected with the teaching. When they are joyful, rapture springs up. When the mind is full of rapture, the body becomes tranquil. When the body is tranquil, they feel bliss. And when they are blissful, the mind becomes stilled. This is called the noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, and lives untroubled among people who are untroubled. They have entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of generosity. So here you can see directly the relationship between things like generosity and meditation. The sequence that you see here ending in stillness. Stillness is the samadhi in the Dhamma. Immersion is the word used by Bhante Sujato. That is the end result of meditation. And so here you can see how generosity and other factors of the Dhamma come together with the idea of meditation. These are all interconnected ideas, and they always work together. And so for us, we need to kind of find ways of making that interconnection. And one way of doing that is, you meditate, you become peaceful, and then you just remind yourself very gently of the fact that you are living a good life. You remind yourself maybe of specific occasions when you have been generous, what gave a powerful boost maybe to yourself, or you just remind yourself that you are generally a very generous person. This is kind of the point here. You are freely generous, open-handed. It's a general aspect of your life. And this is, of course, fully true for the stream enters. If you see people who are well practiced, they are very, very generous people. It's kind of astonishing. To me, Ajahn Brahmali is always kind of the highest example of this. And Ajahn Brahmali, he says to the monks in the monastery, if you ever need anything at all, you're always welcome to just go into my kuti and take whatever you need. So if he has anything that I need, if my robe gets torn or whatever, I can just go into his kuti and take his robe. And Ajahn Brahmali wouldn't mind if I did that. This is kind of thing. I mean, it's not as if we haven't got enough robes anyway. There's always more robes available. But still, and sometimes there are other things in the kuti that he may not have many of. It's just kind of a one-off thing. And if you take it, he would never mind. He doesn't really hold on to things in the world. That's not the way he works. And it's kind of very beautiful, that sense of, okay, what is mine is yours. What is yours is mine. It kind of just, you work in that way. It's a very beautiful way of living. No worldly things are really that important. There's a very powerful example of generosity kind of taken to a very high level. Is found in the Gatikara Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 82, is 81, 82, 81, one of those, 82 maybe, I can't remember. And this is in the time of a previous Buddha, Buddha Kassapa. And this Buddha Kassapa had a disciple called Gatikara, and he was supposed to be a non-returner. He was a lay person, and he wasn't able to become a monk because his parents were blind, so he had to look after his parents. And then one day he comes back to his house. He lives in a thatched house. You know what a thatched house is? Like a straw roof, and very, very beautiful houses when you see them. In England they have these thatched houses. One day he came back home and all the thatch was gone. There was no more thatch on his roof. And so he goes into his blind parents. They're sitting in the house. No roof on the house anymore. It's kind of just the walls or whatever. And he asked his parents, well, what happened to the thatch on our house? And they said, one of the monks of the Buddha Kassapa came. And they said, the Buddha Kassapa needs roofing material on his kuti. And then the parents said, well, in that case, take the roof material of our house. Please take all the thatch from our house. And so they took all the thatch away. And then Gatikara says, wow, what a blessing. What an amazing thing is that the Buddha Kassapa has so much confidence in me that he comes to my house and let's just take away all the thatch. That's kind of generosity for you. It's like it's pre-given, yeah? It's already given. Whatever is mine is yours. Just take it as you like. Yeah? And of course, the Buddha Kassapa would have known that. And then the story carries on that both Gatikara and his parents, they felt so joyful for the next 7 days, yeah, that that it was kind of, they were super duper happy about this because they had been able to support the Buddha Kassapa. And so that is a very beautiful thing, the sense of trust and the sense of understanding and the sense of generosity. Please don't go and take the roofing material of someone's house. Yeah, you have to be very, very sure that they don't mind beforehand. But it kind of is an extreme example of how generosity can work when it's taken all the way to the kind of to the limit, to the conclusion of how this can function, if you like. And so then you can see the joy that arises from this, yeah? Because you are remembering your generosity, your mind is focused on the Dhamma, you are inspired by the meaning and by the Dhamma as a consequence. You know what is truly important in the world. That is what it means to be focused on the meaning, yeah? Remembering the meaning means you understand the power of these things, how they relate to the Dhamma, how they relate to meditation. Then you also get inspired by the Dhamma, because the Dhamma is the teaching that leads you towards that conclusion, that understanding. And then because of that, the joy starts to arise. Yeah, you bring that into your meditation. You remember that this is how you're living your life. And you think, wow, how fortunate I am, yeah, to be able to understand this. Most people don't. I don't know how I was so fortunate. It's not because of me. Don't be conceited about it, because basically it's just random. You happen to come across the Buddha's teachings. You happen to be so fortunate that you are conditioned in this way. Other people are not conditioned in this way. It's not about you. It's about conditioning. So there's no need to be conceited, but there's certainly a need to feel fortunate, yeah, because the conditioning is very fortunate. So never make these things into conceit, because it has nothing to do with you. Yeah, that is a very important point here. And then the joy arises, and then the whole meditation takes off. You bring that in together with the breath, yeah, and then the breath develops naturally through these various stages. And the stages that you see here are the same stages you find that we'll see later on in the dependent liberation sequence, which is very, very common in the sutras. It is the same thing that you find in the 7 bojjhangas, the 7 factors of awakening, similar sequence again, core aspects of the Dhamma. It's the same sequence roughly that you find in the Anapanasati Sutta, mindfulness of breathing. So this is core Dhamma, yeah, very, very common in some of the most important suttas. They are important because they are found in so many places. You find this particular sequence. This is how you decide whether something is critical and a core part of the Dhamma or not. And then you gain samadhi eventually based on that. And then because you have samadhi, then the insights will also come. And then you live in balance, yeah, among people who are unbalanced. Because when you have samadhi, it means your mind is kind of even. You don't get kind of buffeted around by desires and aversions anymore. You are not really troubled, because the trouble arises from a mind which is always out of control. And in this way, you become a very balanced kind of individual as a consequence of this. So there you are. That is how the connection between generosity and freedom, yeah, a very powerful insight into how the mind works right there. So hope that makes sense for you. And if it doesn't make complete sense, then it's not surprising, because these are very deep things. Even though it is simple, it is deep at the same time. So just take it on board as far as you can. Okay, so now let us move on to the next sutta. And this sutta, now we are moving from generosity to morality. Yeah, so morality also, there is a freedom aspect to the idea of morality, or if you want to call it kindness, if you wish, or you can call it ethics, or you can call it whatever you like. But there is a aspect of freedom again in this as well. And this sutta is again from the AN, Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, the chapter 8 of the 8th, sutta number 39. And this is called Streams, is the name of the sutta. So this is what the Buddha has to say here. Because there are these 8 streams of merit, streams of the wholesome, nutriments of happiness, heavenly, ripening in happiness, conducive to heaven, that lead to what is wished for, desired, agreeable, to one's welfare and happiness. What 8? Streams of merit. These are kind of the, in other words, the merit just keeps on coming. They are the stream, it runs on and runs on and runs on. Streams of the wholesome. These are positive, powerfully positive conditioning factors. Nutriments of happiness. Isn't that nice? The nutriment of happiness. If you want to know how to be happy, well, this is how you do it. You get that nutriment, Take that supplement, that nutriment in your life. And if you take that nutriment in your life, then happiness will result. So make sure you eat healthily. This is what this is saying. This is the healthy eating, the nutriments. So we'll soon find out what that healthy eating means. And because it is streams of the wholesome and nutriments of happiness, it means that it is heavenly. The Buddha does not really say, don't get reborn in heaven, make sure you get reborn as a human being, because heaven is bad for you. You will just enjoy yourself, you won't practice the Dhamma, you need more dukkha in your life. You haven't got enough dukkha, you're not going to practice. Does the Buddha ever say that? No. Human beings, other ordinary human beings say that. The Buddha never says that. He says it is okay. If you want to get reborn in heaven, it is a natural consequence of our desire for happiness. So it is heavenly, ripening in happiness, conducive to heaven. So that leads to what is wished for, desired and agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. So very positive expression of these things. So what are these 8? And what is kind of nice about these 8 that we're going to see now is that they are not really out of reach for anyone. They are within reach. And so that is kind of very helpful. If you say that the nutriments of happiness is awakening, well, you might as well give up. But it's too far away. But these 8 that we're going to see here are within reach pretty much of everyone, at least potentially. So let's see what they are. Number 1. Here, a noble disciple has gone for refuge to the Buddha. This is the first stream of merit, stream of the wholesome, nutriment of happiness, heavenly, ripening in happiness, conducive to heaven, that leads to what is wished for, desired and agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. You go for refuge to the Buddha. That's all you have to do. So all you have to do is to recite the formula, Buddhang saranang gacchami, bang, stream of merit. It's too easy to be true, right? You can't really believe it when you put it like that. So it's not really enough to say Buddhang saranang gacchami. You have to actually mean it as well. That is the hard part, to really mean it. What does it mean to go for refuge to the Buddha? This comes in all kind of degrees. When you say that, sometimes people just say it because everyone else says it and is kind of doing it in a group, so you kind of recite along while you're thinking about dinner at the same time, And you know, and that's natural. I don't mean to to make fun of people. Of course, it's natural that will happen because we are human beings. It is hard to really go for refuge to the Buddha because the real refuge of the Buddha, you have to understand what the Buddha is to go for refuge to the Buddha. How many people really understand that? Some people think the Buddha was just a historical figure. Some people say maybe there wasn't any Buddha at all. Some people think of the Buddha as some kind of supernatural phenomenon. Some people, we have all kinds of different ideas of the Buddha. But to really understand what the Buddha is actually profound and difficult. And it takes a lot of contemplation to really get that. What is this awakening experience? What are the qualities that follow from awakening? Why is the Buddha so special? And the answer is usually very simple. The reason is because he saw to the very bottom of the human experience. He understands what it is to be human. And he understands our desire to be happy, to get away from suffering. And he understands the path that leads to the highest kind of happiness. This is kind of the wisdom of the Buddha. It goes to the very core of what is the meaning of life, and he has the answers. That is basically what the Buddha is. And so it is, when you think about it, quite extraordinary, because everyone in the world is searching for these things. Everyone is searching for meaning. Everyone is searching for finding real happiness, real contentment. Everything we do in life is geared towards that. Starting with, from you get out of bed and you have breakfast in the morning, what is the breakfast you're going to choose? Are you going to choose that kind of terrible breakfast over there or the nice one over here? Well, you're going to choose the nice one over here. Why is that? Because you like happiness. It's as simple as that. Everyone wants to be happy. And so this is why the Buddha is so special. And so when you go for refuge to the Buddha, you have an appreciation of what it is that you go to refuge to. Someone who can guide you in your life towards the highest jewel, the most important thing in the world that actually gives rise to all of those things that you always wanted. You didn't even know you wanted some of these things because you didn't know they existed. Only after the Buddha has pointed them out do you understand, actually, yes, I wanted this all along. I just didn't know it was on the menu. It actually is on the menu. That's what the Buddha says. It's just way down the menu. You have to look all the way to the bottom, go past all the superficial stuff and come to the profound things. And so when you go for refuge to the Buddha, when you bow down to the Buddha, make that into an opportunity of doing something that is truly powerful and meaningful. When you bow down to the Buddha, remind yourself what you're bowing down to. The Buddha is basically a symbol of all the highest qualities that can be achieved by a human being. It's a symbol of wisdom, a symbol of compassion, a symbol of virtue and kindness and care and peace and stillness and all of these kind of things in one figure. That is what the Buddha is. And so when you bow down to the Buddha, you're not so much bowing down to a person, because the Buddha isn't a person in an ordinary sense. If you give up the sense of self, then are you really a person? Well, in a way you are, but in a way you're not. What the Buddha is, he has become the Dhamma. He has become all of these qualities. And so what you're bowing down to is those qualities. And you aspire for the same qualities. Why wouldn't you? Of course you're going to aspire for those qualities. Who doesn't want to be wise? Who doesn't want to be kind? Who doesn't want to be compassionate? Who doesn't want to be peaceful? So when you bow down to the Buddha and you aspire for those qualities because you are bowing down, it means you respect those qualities. And when you respect them, you are building them up within yourself as a consequence. And this is how you make something out of the idea of going for refuge. It is not something that you do kind of just randomly while you're thinking about something else. It is something that you make into a real practice. And this is how the idea of, observances that we do, or little rituals that we do, we give them a very powerful meaning, and they become part of building up the good qualities inside of us. And it is useful, even not just when you go on retreat, but when you go back home. If you have a little statue of the Buddha or a picture of the Buddha or whatever it is that you have, or maybe just the Tipitaka or whatever, bowing is a beautiful thing to do because it is a way of showing respect that is very obvious. It feels like you're respecting something when you bow down to it. It feels like you're putting something high when you do that. And this is what they do in the suttas all the time. So bowing is very, very powerful. And those people who don't bow regularly, they are missing out. Bow regularly, bow every day. Do it first thing in the morning when you wake up. You're setting up your day in a good way. When you remember all of these powerful qualities and you're building them up in your own life as a consequence. And bowing down is not an act of servility or anything like that. It's an act of aspiration, an act of inspiration, of wanting to lift yourself up and build up the good qualities within yourself. That is what bowing down really is about. So this is how you can imagine yourself going for refuge to the Buddha in a more powerful way. And as you do this, as you read more of the suttas, as you understand who the Buddha truly is, these things start to have more meaning in your life. They really become powerful. Okay, so that is the idea of going for refuge to the Buddha. And again, a noble disciple has gone for refuge to the Dhamma. This is the second stream of merit that leads to what is wished for, desired and agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. So again, when you bow down to the Dhamma, it's a similar kind of thing, an understanding of what it is that you are bowing down to. The Dhamma, of course, is the teachings that come from the awakened mind, and that's why they are so interesting and so powerful, and you start to understand how incredible fortunate each one of us is to have access to these teachings. The most important literature in the history of the world, that's what the Dhamma really is. A noble disciple has gone for refuge to the Sangha. This is the third stream of merit that leads to what is wished for, desired and agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. The Sangha here is a reference to those awakened ones, the Aryas, the noble ones in the world, the people who understand the Dhamma, who bring it forward in society and make it available to everyone else, the ones who know what the Buddha really means. And because they are the real teachers in the world, they are also worthy of, as it says elsewhere, offerings and hospitality and all of those kind of things. But they are, again, symbols of the good qualities of the Dhamma, and they should remind you of that. And when you bow down to people who have very profound qualities, it feels very natural. It feels very, okay, I should be doing this. It's like, bowing down to Ajahn Brahmali or whatever. It just feels completely natural. It feels like it's a good thing, and it's a beautiful thing to do. And what is painful in the world is if you have to bow down to superficial things, if you have to bow down to egos, if you have to bow down to someone just because they are powerful. Now that is painful, that is bad, that feels wrong. But when you bow down to the goodness in the world, then it feels very natural, and it just happens. So this is the first three of these 8 qualities, that are streams of the merit, going for refuge, the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Then it carries on, and it comes to the last 5 of the 8. There are, bhikkhus, these 5 gifts, great gifts, primal, of long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated, and never before adulterated, which are not being adulterated and will not be adulterated, but not repudiated by wise ascetics and Brahmins. So now we come to the ideas of morality. This is what comes next here. So taking refuge is kind of a morality as well, but this is more kind of regular kind of morality. And you will notice here that this morality is called a gift. This is kind of, in a sense, a higher kind of gift. It's a gift that is more psychological in nature, because if you treat other people well, in a moral way, they will be free of fear and all of these kind of things. That is a gift that you're giving to the world when you are moral. It is not just about you, it is about other people. They will feel safe in your presence. They will feel at ease in your presence because they know that you will treat them well. You won't take them for granted. You won't rip them off, etc., and all of these kind of things. They can trust you. And trust is a very beautiful thing to have in society. A society that is high on trust tends to be a good society. People are at ease with each other. You can do business quite easily. You don't need so many lawyers, That's kind of the advantage. Lawyers are very expensive, that's a good thing. You don't need so many lawyers. So the more you can keep the precepts, the less lawyers you need. Are there any lawyers here? getting worried now for a second. I might be no lawyers. Well, we need to have more lawyers. The lawyers should also come on these retreats, right? So please come, lawyers. We promise not to make too many lawyer jokes. So yeah. So what are these 5? So and no surprise here. Here, a noble disciple, having abandoned the destruction of life, abstains from the destruction of life. By abstaining from the destruction of life, the noble disciple gives to an immeasurable number of beings freedom from fear, enmity, and affliction. Yeah, so when you don't destroy living beings, when you look after life, when you have compassion for living beings, having compassion for living beings here is the flip side of the coin of not destroying living beings. So when you do that, you are giving freedom from fear and enmity and affliction to an immeasurable number of beings. All the beings that you come across in your life will feel a sense of freedom in your presence. And maybe they are higher beings like the devas who see your good conduct, and they also will rejoice in that good conduct of yours. And so this is kind of the idea here, yeah? An immeasurable number of beings. It's kind of hard to understand that, but obviously that freedom that you give to the world by abstaining from destruction of life, it kind of maybe seeps into the kind of general atmosphere, yeah, it kind of seeps into the world through the mind or whatever, and it kind of affects everyone around you, even if you're not in direct contact with them. So maybe this is a more profound than we think, because we don't really come into contact with a immeasurable number of beings. So maybe there's something more going on here, yeah, a sense of that mind state of abstaining from the destruction of life. It moves on beyond the ordinary beings that we meet, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's what's going on there. Yeah. And then what is so interesting, that person themselves in turn enjoy immeasurable freedom from fear, enmity, and affliction. So if you give that freedom of affliction and enmity to other beings, you get that in return. And I think this is true on a number of levels. And the most basic level is that if you give something to the world, if you treat the world in a certain way, then it feels to you as if the world is treating you like that. If you treat the world with kindness, it feels like the world is kind to you in return. Yeah? You see that in the world. That which you give to the world is what you see in the world. If you are a very bad person, you do a lot of badness, you will see the badness in other people around you. If you are a good person, you will see the good in people around you. And so by being virtuous in a very deep sense, it's also much easier to have metta and compassion in the world, because that is what you start to see in the world around you. And so a kind and a good person actually is someone who is far more fearless. Yeah, you just do things. You trust that things will be okay. And of course the reality is that very often they are. They tend to be okay because of that. Yeah, the fearlessness breeds a kind of force field almost around you, yeah, where you become almost kind of impregnable. You can't really, nothing really happens to you. And so that is the first way in which, you enjoy immeasurable, again the word immeasurable freedom from fear, enmity. And the second way, of course, is the fact that this also affects your rebirth. Your rebirth in the future will then depend on how you live life now. And so your future life, you will have no enmity, you will have no fear, or very little of it, because of how you're living this life. And so these things are really important. Taking the precepts very seriously, not destroying life. Try to take this really, really seriously. Go as far as you possibly can. I got an email from a lady I know in Victoria, and she's one of these people who lives basically like a monastic. She lives by herself on this large property, far away in the forest. But she is this amazing person, and she wrote me an email and she said, "Oh, I've got termites in my house." Yeah, she lives away in the forest, and I'm not sure what to do. Should I is this the right time to kind of get the exterminator, because otherwise my house, what's going to happen to my house, if I have termites in it? And so she wanted my advice for what to do. And sometimes these are very difficult decisions, yeah? Sometimes the feeling is that maybe now, I don't really want to kill anything, but maybe this is one of those exemptions where I have to kill. And then before I had a chance to answer, sometimes I don't answer my emails straight away, depending on what the issue is. And before I got a chance to answer, I got a second email back from her, and she said, "No, I've decided there's no way I can kill those termites. Yeah, absolutely not. If it means my house will be eaten, so be it. Killing is just out of the question." And I thought, wow, isn't that kind of extraordinary? Here is someone who is willing to sacrifice their house so that she doesn't have to kill those termites. And I was so happy to see that, that someone is willing to go to that extent. And that is kind of shows you the degree to which we can go. If you want to practice these precepts fully, the degree at which we can go, because we really want to look after life. We really want to support life fully if we can. And I thought that was really inspiring to see someone live to that level of harmlessness. Anyway, just to give you an example, some of the things that you hear as a monk that you may not hear otherwise, because as a monk you get to hear some really nice stuff, and this is one of those nice stuffs that you get to hear as a monk. So so then this is the first gift, the great gift, primal, of long-standing, traditional. Ancient, unadulterated, never before adulterated, which is not being adulterated and will not be adulterated. Well, this word adulterate is being used a little bit too much, I think, in this sentence, but anyway, not repudiated by wise ascetics and Brahmins. This is the fourth stream of merit that leads to what is wished for, desired, agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. And then comes the next one, again a noble disciple, having abandoned taking what is not given, abstains from taking what is not given. And when you abstain from taking what is not given, you give to an immeasurable number of beings freedom from fear, enmity, and affliction. And in return, you also enjoy that immeasurable freedom from fear, enmity, and affliction. You abstain from sexual misconduct, and again, you give to an immeasurable number of beings the freedom from fear, enmity, and affliction. And in turn, you enjoy the same thing. You abstain from false speech, and again, you enjoy the same things as a consequence of that. I think it's very useful to remember how much havoc we can cause in the world by not keeping these precepts. How much fear there is in the world. You can see with the wars around in the world, in Ukraine and the Middle East or whatever, you can see how much fear that breeds. And not just in those areas, but right here in Australia, people are fearful when they see these wars going on. You feel depressed about it, you feel sad about it. It leads to all kinds of erosion of trust and negativity in society. Or if you hear about someone who is a thief in your neighborhood, let alone they steal from your house, afterward it's very hard to build up a sense of trust again. You feel like you have been let down by society or been let down by other people, and you feel more fearful after that. It is very difficult to build up again the sense of feeling safe in your house in quite the same way. So these things are actually very destructive. And so by doing the opposite, we are really making a big difference in the world. We are kind of holding up society. And not only do we act in that way, but we also encourage other people to do the same. Mostly through our example, but also if you have an opportunity to teach to somebody, you will teach them these things. And so you're building up trust in society, and that leads to all of these positive emotions as a consequence. Lying is terrible. If people are lying to you, it feels really bad. It feels you cannot trust this person anymore. What are they going to say? Where is truth here? Sexual misconduct is also very bad because it leads to a lot of mistrust between people who are very close to each other. And then the last one that we come to here, abstaining from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. By abstaining from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness, the noble disciple gives an immeasurable number of beings freedom from fear, enmity, and affliction. He himself, or they themselves, in turn enjoy immeasurable freedom from fear, enmity, and affliction. People who are drunk or intoxicated are not nice to be around. They are often kind of a little bit frightening. It feels like they're out of control. You don't know what they're going to do next. And so by being sober, by not drinking, you're giving again something very powerful to the world. So take these precepts seriously. Sometimes you find that the suttas don't emphasize the fifth precept as much as the other ones. The fifth precept is actually mentioned much more rarely than the other ones. But here it is mentioned, and here it is mentioned as a very powerful way of creating something positive for yourself and for the world around you. This is the fifth gift, a great gift, primal, of long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated, never before adulterated, which is not being adulterated and will not be adulterated, not repudiated by wise ascetics and Brahmins. This is the eighth stream of merit that leads to what is wished for, desired and agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. So freedom again, the freedom that arises from virtue, from kindness in the world. Again, another powerful way of thinking about this. And also part of this is the idea of heaven. We have just seen that heaven is also included in this because ultimately it leads to a heavenly rebirth, and the heavenly rebirth is a rebirth that is freedom. Again, there's a lot of freedom in the heavenly realm. That is why, one of the reasons why it is heavenly. Freedom from a lot of dukkha, freedom from bad beings. People in the heavenly realm tend to be better beings because that's why they get reborn there. So they are also part of this freedom that you see here. You have to go back to the early sutta. The Buddha talks about the gradual instruction, generosity, morality, and then heaven. And all of this is kind of part of this particular sutta here. These bhikkhus are the 8 streams of merit, streams of the wholesome, nutriments of happiness, heavenly ripening and happiness conducive to heaven, that lead to what is wished for, desired and agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. So there you are. That is all we have time for this morning. And as always, please keep on enjoying yourself. Have a nice lunch, and we'll see you back again at 3 o'clock this afternoon.